Connie's Chronicles is a documentary-style exploration of one Yorkshire family's hidden history. It's a journey uncovered through dusty historical archives, century-old census records, whispered family memories, and sudden, unexpected DNA discoveries.
Yeah, it actively pulls you in. Imagine the sound of a heavy leather-bound ledger being pulled from a wooden shelf.
Oh yeah, that very specific dusty smell.
Exactly. You turn these thick, slightly damp parchment pages, and you hear the scratch of a steel-nibbed pen dipping into an inkwell.
Right.
We are looking at a document from April 12, 1890, generated in the rural parish of Killam in East Yorkshire.
A tiny agricultural community.
Yeah, and a baby girl has just been born. A few weeks later, on May 17th, she's baptized in the village church.
Right, which was basically the center of everything back then.
It really was. So for this deep dive, we have a stack of primary sources on the table in front of us: parish registers, census returns, fading Edwardian newspaper clippings.
And a really crucial modern DNA report from a man named Paul, who's digging into his family's past.
Right. Our mission today is to take all these fragmented records and reconstruct a life that the official archives basically tried to erase.
Yeah, we're auditing the historical record.
We are. And the very first document we have, that baptismal register from 1890, it really sets the stage. The clerk's handwriting is, formal, deliberate. He writes the child's name, Ethel Amelia Noddle.
Right.
He writes the mother's name, clearly, Amelia Noddle. But when he moves his pen to the column for the father, he writes nothing. He leaves it entirely blank.
It's just a visually arresting detail when you handle these physical copies.
Yeah, it really is.
You have this page densely packed with bureaucratic data, dates, occupations, and then just an empty physical void.
A glaring omission.
Exactly. To really grasp the gravity of that blank space,
Yeah.
we have to transport ourselves into the societal machinery of 1890.
Which is the absolute height of Queen Victoria's Britain.
Yes. A culture obsessed with lineage, order, and this very rigid concept of respectability.
All right.
And Killam wasn't an anonymous metropolis. It was tight-knit. In a place like that, the village church operated as the ultimate arbiter of social standing.
I want to push on that a bit, actually, because we hear Victorian morality thrown around a lot as a cliche.
Yeah.
What did that actually mean for you, the listener, if you lived in a rural village? If everybody knew everybody, surely the identity of the father wasn't an actual mystery to the neighbor.
Right, and that is the core hypocrisy of the era. You're entirely correct.
Yeah.
In a village of a few hundred people, secrets of that magnitude rarely stayed hidden.
Right. People talk.
Exactly. The blank space wasn't about a lack of local gossip. It was about the official, legal, and social sanctioning of a child.
Oh, okay.
Under the laws of the time, an illegitimate birth was a stain that rested entirely on the mother.
Just the mother.
Just her. The Poor Law Amendment Act specifically made illegitimate children the sole financial responsibility of their mothers.
Wow.
The state actively wanted to punish women who fell outside of wedlock to deter the behavior.
Yeah.
So a blank space on a permanent record was a formal declaration of illegitimacy.
It was a societal judgment codified in ink.
Exactly.
It's essentially a brand.
Yes, it is. For Amelia, the mother, and for young Ethel, that missing ink forced them into a permanent state of vulnerability.
Because they're navigating a community that constantly evaluates their moral failing.
Right. It restricted employment, social mobility, and it placed an immense economic burden on Amelia. She had a mouth to feed with zero legal recourse to demand support from the father.
I mean, think about building a family tree. You usually start with a solid trunk, right?
Yeah.
And you follow the roots deep into the earth, tracing branches generation by generation. It grounds you.
It tells you where you come from.
Exactly. But for Ethel, the taproot was severed before she took her first breath.
That lack of grounding is really the defining feature of her early existence.
Ethel's story began with a silence.
Yeah. And the tragic reality of Victorian rural life is that a silence on a birth record almost inevitably dictated a physical fracture in the home.
Right.
The ink was barely dry on that register when the consequences became apparent. The very next document in our stack is the 1891 census.
Okay.
Ethel's merely 4 months old. But when you scan the household looking for Amelia, the mother, she isn't there.
Wait, walk me through the logistics of that. A 4-month-old infant requires constant care. Where is the baby and where is the mother?
So infant Ethel is recorded in the household of Charles and Mary Wood, still in the village of Killam.
Okay.
In the column denoting her relationship to the head of the household, the enumerator has simply written niece.
Let me pause you there, because I've looked at these returns, and Mary Wood was Amelia's sister.
Right.
On the surface, an aunt taking in a niece sounds like a standard, maybe even loving family arrangement, but there is a really dark economic reality driving this separation, isn't there?
Absolutely. This gives us a raw look at the working class safety net, or really the lack of one.
Right.
When a single mother in 1891 couldn't cope, there was no state welfare system to catch her.
Just the workhouse.
Exactly. And the workhouse was intentionally designed to be so brutal that people would do anything to avoid it.
So what does Amelia do?
She likely had to find employment, probably live in domestic service, just to survive. And you cannot bring an illegitimate newborn into a respectable Victorian household as a servant.
Of course not. So the family network of women steps in to absorb the crisis.
Yes. Mary takes her sister's child. But we have to be careful not to let the clinical language of the census mask the trauma here.
Right. The word niece is so tidy.
Exactly. This is a newborn baby experiencing the profound physical displacement of being separated from her biological mother. The attachment is broken almost immediately.
And what strikes me as we follow the paper trail is that this displacement becomes a pattern.
Yes, it does.
10 years pass. We poll the 1901 census. Ethel is now a 10-year-old girl, but she isn't with her aunt and uncle in Killam anymore.
Right.
She has been uprooted again. She's moved to the village of Ulrome, living in the household of an agricultural laborer named Robert Frankish.
And the official record just lists her as a child in his home.
Yeah.
But to understand the true dynamic, we have to look ahead to later newspaper reports, which explicitly state that Robert Frankish practically adopted the girl and brought her up since she was a child.
Let's spend some time unpacking Robert Frankish, because he is just a fascinating figure in this stack of documents.
He really is.
We are talking about an agricultural laborer, a man who worked the earth, subject to the seasons. He was likely earning barely enough to keep a roof over his own head.
That context is vital. Agricultural laborers in East Yorkshire back then lived incredibly precarious lives.
Right. One bad harvest away from ruin.
Exactly. Their income was meager, their bodies were worn down by the elements, every penny was accounted for.
Wow.
So taking in a child that is not your biological flesh and blood, feeding her, clothing her, paying for whatever basic education she might get, it's an act of profound everyday heroism.
But I want you, the listener, to put yourself in a 10-year-old's shoes for a second. Try to process the psychology of this.
Yeah, it's heavy.
By the time Ethel is 10, she has been passed from her biological mother to her aunt and now to a man who is not her father. What does that do to a developing mind?
A lot of damage.
Right. Did she ever truly view Amelia as a mother? Or did Robert Frankish become the only real parent she ever knew?
From a psychological standpoint, that level of early instability creates a profound sense of insecurity.
I can imagine.
A child learns that home is conditional. Belonging can be shifted based on economic necessity or adult decisions totally outside her control.
Yeah.
However, Robert Frankish provided an anchor. He offered a foundation of care in a world that had previously only offered her a revolving door of households. He tried to be the safety net.
He tried. But as we see in the records, the protective bubble of a foster home eventually has to pop. The harsh public realities of growing up in the working class were waiting for her.
Yes. Young women of Ethel's social standing didn't get an extended adolescence.
No, finding yourself in your 20s.
Definitely not. By her mid-teens, she was expected to earn her keep, which meant entering domestic service.
And I think we need to aggressively dismantle the modern romanticization of domestic service. We aren't talking about polishing silver in the background of a polite period drama here.
Far from it. For a rural teenage girl, it was back-breaking, isolating toil.
Right.
It meant waking in the dark, in a freezing attic room, hauling heavy scuttles of coal up multiple flights of stairs to light fires before the family even woke up.
Ugh, the physical toll.
Blacklighting stoves, scrubbing stone floors on your hands and knees,
Yeah.
and living under the constant critical surveillance of your employers.
While owning absolutely nothing yourself.
Exactly. You're entirely surrounded by the comforts and possessions of others.
It's just a pressure cooker of isolation. And it is exactly in this environment that Ethel's life violently fractures into the public record.
Yes.
Our sources shift from quiet census ledgers to loud, judging Edwardian newspapers.
The clippings from this period paint a really bleak trajectory. The first major incident we have documented is from August 10, 1906, in the Bridlington and Quay Gazette.
Okay, what happened?
Ethel is around 16 years old. She's charged with stealing 17 shillings from her employer, a man named Thomas Greaves, who ran a lodging house.
Wow.
A police constable, P.C. Lamplow, charges her. She admits to the theft and hands back some of the coins.
A 16-year-old girl standing in a courtroom facing the full machinery of Edwardian justice.
Yeah.
But the detail in this clipping that completely stops me is who shows up for her. It's Robert Frankish.
It is a devastating scene to read. The newspaper describes a gray-haired man stepping forward in the court. Tears are streaming down his cheeks.
Oh, man.
He addresses the magistrate and says, "It's a pity to see her like this." He explains that he and his wife treated her as an adopted daughter. But then he reveals a crucial piece of context. His wife had recently been stricken with paralysis.
So his whole world is falling apart, too.
Yes. He begs the court for leniency, promising to take Ethel back and bring her up again. And then he bails her out for £5.
Let's contextualize that £5, because to a modern ear, £5 sounds like, lunch money.
In 1906, for an agricultural laborer, £5 was an astronomical sum. We are talking about weeks, possibly months, of his wages.
But it's everything he has.
It represents a massive financial sacrifice. It proves the depth of his devotion to this girl.
The man who raised her, weeping in a courtroom, emptying his pockets to save her. But the tragedy is that his sacrifice doesn't magically fix the underlying trauma.
No, it doesn't.
Just a few months later, on March 9th, 1907, we find another clipping from the Hull and East Yorkshire Times. The headline is massive and just dripping with judgment. Girls' ingratitude.
The Edwardian press viewed poverty and crime as moral failings, not systemic issues. The language was always designed to shame.
So Ethel, who is now 17, goes to a farmer, J.H. Wilson. She uses false pretenses to get £2 from him, claiming that Robert Frankish had been ill in bed for 3 weeks and needed the money to pay for ditch cleaning.
Right.
But this time, Frankish testifies against her. He stands in court and says he wasn't ill, he had been at work. The magistrate sentences her to 14 days hard labor.
And we really need to explain what hard labor actually entailed for a 17-year-old girl in 1907.
Please do, because it wasn't just being locked in a room.
No, it was designed to break the spirit. It often involved the silent system, where prisoners were forbidden to speak.
No.
The physical labor for women frequently involved tasks like oakum picking.
Which is what, exactly?
It meant sitting for hours, untwisting old, tarred ship ropes with your bare hands until your fingers bled, just to recycle the fibers. Or it involved punishing relentless work in the prison laundry, dealing with boiling water and heavy, sodden fabrics in highly toxic environments.
14 days of that, for lying to get £2.
Yeah.
And yet the downward spiral accelerates. By October 11th, 1907, she is 18. She's arrested by a PC Ma right at Frankish's house in Ulrum.
So she would gone back there.
Yeah. She had been working for a Mrs. Annie Mary Palmer. Items went missing when Ethel left. She's found with the stolen goods and remanded to Hull Jail.
Hull Jail was a formidable Victorian prison. Remanded means she was held in custody awaiting trial or further sentencing.
Right.
The institutionalization of young women in this era often acted as a permanent trap. Once you were in the system, the stigma made legitimate employment almost impossible to find. It just led to a cycle of reoffending.
I am so glad you brought up the stigma and the moralizing tone at the time, because I want to aggressively push back on how the historical record characterizes her here.
Go for it.
The magistrates, the newspapers with their girls in gratitude headlines, they are painting a picture of a deceitful, hardened, calculating criminal.
A menace to society.
Exactly, but look at the actual inventory of the items she stole from Mrs. Palmer. The police report lists it perfectly.
Yes. The stolen property is meticulously cataloged.
It lists a muslin dress, a nun's veiling blouse.
Right.
Now, what exactly is a nun's veiling blouse?
Nun's veiling is a very fine, lightweight, softly woven woolen fabric. It drapes beautifully and was highly favored by middle-class and upper-class women for elegant daytime wear.
Right. So look at this list. Muslin, fine wool, a silk belt, a white petticoat, and a pair of corsets. This is not the inventory of a master thief fencing goods on the black market for survival cash. She isn't stealing silver spoons or pocket watches.
No.
She is stealing clothes. To me, that completely rewrites her profile.
How so?
This is a profoundly displaced, deeply lonely teenager who is desperately grasping for a tiny bit of finery. She wants to feel pretty. She wants to literally put on a new identity to escape the soot and the scrubbing brushes of the attic.
That is a brilliant sociological read of the evidence. The legal system completely stripped away the context of her life.
Totally.
They didn't pause to ask why a young woman with no biological parents, whose foster mother had just been paralyzed, who was sent to live in a stranger's attic, might act out in this specific way.
They just didn't care.
They just saw broken law and a breach of class boundaries. But you were right, this was a sartorial cry for help.
Exactly. Behind the headlines was a frightened young woman trying to survive.
And sitting in a cell in Hull Jail in 1907, branded as a thief, that could so easily have been the final chapter of her story.
It usually was for people in her situation.
But instead of breaking her, that stone cell became the bedrock from which she launched an absolute pivot. The turnaround we see in the next set of documents is nothing short of staggering.
It really gives you historical whiplash, because we jump just 2 years forward to November 24th, 1909.
Okay.
We are out of the police courts. We are standing in the parish church in Old Rome. Ethel, who is now 20 years old, recorded as a spinster, is marrying a man named Henry Milner Hughes.
A huge shift.
He is 25, a bachelor, and his occupation is listed as a wagoner. How does a girl with a criminal record manage this kind of social integration so quickly?
Well, rural mobility played a part. While villages were insular, moving just a few parishes over could sometimes afford a person a fresh start, especially if they were willing to work hard.
That makes sense.
But we also have to recognize the immense significance of marrying a wagoner in this specific agricultural economy.
Walk me through what a wagoner actually did.
So Henry's father, Thomas Milner Hughes, was a coal worker. This is a deeply entrenched, hardworking family. A wagoner was the logistical lifeblood of the rural economy.
Okay.
They were responsible for driving the heavy horse-drawn wagons, moving grain, produce, coal, and supplies across the county.
Heavy lifting.
Yeah. It meant waking up hours before dawn to tend to the draft horses, massive Clydesdales or Shires. It was grueling, physical, weather-dependent work. But crucially, it was highly skilled and highly respected. It represented immense, unshakable stability.
So Ethel is aligning herself with a man who represents the exact opposite of the chaos she grew up in.
Precisely.
But when I look at this marriage certificate, a day that should be entirely about new beginnings, the shadow of 1890 is still sitting right there on the page.
In blank space.
You look at the columns: date, name, age, condition, rank, residence, and then there is a column for father's name and surname. Henry's side is proudly filled out, Thomas Milner Hughes. Ethel's side is completely, entirely blank, again.
It is a haunting repetition.
Hmm.
On her wedding day, an occasion culturally defined by family legacy, by the patriarchal tradition of a father giving his daughter away, the official record forces her to document her missing lineage once more.
Yeah.
The state machinery required her to acknowledge the void.
But I don't think she saw it as a void anymore. I think about it like a closed door.
What do you mean?
In 1890, when she was a baby, that blank space was a closed door locked from the outside. It was a vulnerability thrust upon her by a society she couldn't fight.
Right.
But in 1909, as a 20-year-old woman standing at the altar, signing the register with witnesses J. Cooper and E. Hardy beside her, she is looking at that closed door and actively choosing to turn her back on it.
Oh, I see.
By marrying Henry, by building her own family, she is deciding the silence, the jail cell, the courtrooms will no longer define her trajectory.
He is seizing agency. And if we truly analyze the speed of that transformation, it requires a moment of genuine awe.
It really does.
From an 18-year-old girl stripped of her freedom in a Victorian prison to a 20-year-old wife commanding her own hearth, the psychological resilience required to arrest a societal freefall of that magnitude is extraordinary.
But becoming a wife was just the foundation. The true transformation, the absolute cementing of her new identity, unfolds over the next few decades as she becomes the matriarch of her own bloodline.
And we see the undeniable proof of her triumph in the 1911 census.
Yes.
This single document provides one of the most profound emotional resolutions I have ever encountered in a genealogical deep dive.
It's amazing.
Ethel is 21. She and Henry have a 1-year-old daughter named Elsie. They are successfully building the family she never had. But look closely at the other name listed in that household. It is Robert Frankish. He's now 80 years old.
That detail, it stops my heart every time I read it.
Think about the arc of that specific relationship. The wild, displaced girl who was dragged into court, the teenager he had to stand and weep for in front of a magistrate.
The girl who stole because she was so fractured.
Right. She has now taken that 80-year-old agricultural laborer into her own home. She is providing for him in his final, frail years.
She became the safety net for the man who sacrificed everything to be her safety net. It is the ultimate redemption arc.
It really is.
She didn't just survive the trauma, she metabolized it and became capable of profound care. And that capacity for care only expands. By the time we look at the 1921 census, the household is humming with life.
Growing fast.
Elsie is there, and now we have Ronald, Winifred, and Constance. Connie.
Yes, and here the narrative begins to bridge the gap between Ethel's singular survival story and the wider legacy that Paul and his family are researching in Connie's Chronicles.
Right.
But we cannot gloss over what it took to keep that household running. When we look at the 1939 register, taken on the eve of the Second World War, Ethel's occupation is listed with a phrase that is ubiquitous in these records, yet so heavily loaded: domestic duties unpaid.
Domestic duties unpaid. That tiny bureaucratic phrase basically masks the entire infrastructure of human history.
Precisely. It is the invisible, exhausting labor of the women who held the fabric of Britain together.
Yeah.
Ethel raised this family through the trauma of the First World War, through the brutal economic depression of the interwar years, and into the rationing and terror of WWII.
Just incredible strength.
Domestic duties unpaid meant being the first one awake to clear the ashes and light the fires.
Yeah.
It meant boiling water for baths and laundry, stretching meager food rations to feed a laboring husband and growing children.
Mending clothes by lamplight.
Yes, and managing the complex emotional weather of a busy house.
I want to paint a sensory picture of what that house in Orem felt like in the 1920s.
Go ahead.
Close your eyes and imagine it. It's the sharp smell of coal smoke mixing with the damp wool of coats hung by the door. It's the heavy rhythmic thud of Henry's work boots hitting the floorboards after hours out in the weather with the heavy horses.
Right.
It is the constant clatter of pots in the kitchen, the hiss of a hot iron, the voices of children. It is a life of ceaseless, demanding motion.
But very different from her childhood.
Exactly. Unlike the chaotic, frightening motion of her childhood, being passed from aunt to foster father to a freezing servant's attic, this motion has a solid center of gravity. And that center of gravity is Ethel.
And that is the exact environment that forged Constance. Connie's entire worldview, her values, her understanding of what a family is supposed to be, the strength she exhibited in her own life, was built directly on the foundation of Ethel's quiet, relentless endurance.
Wow.
Connie learned how to build a family by watching a woman who had to invent the concept from scratch.
She completely reclaimed her narrative. She lived to see her children grow, to see the roots of her family tree finally take hold in the earth.
She did.
She lived until January 25th, 1949, and was buried in St. Andrew's Churchyard in Ulrome, the village where she ultimately found her peace.
And yet, as she went to her grave in 1949, one fundamental mystery remained unsolved.
The father.
She lived her entire 58 years with that blank space trailing behind her. She never knew the name of her biological father.
It's heartbreaking.
But history is remarkably patient, and it had one final, distinctly modern twist waiting for her descendants.
This is where the story leaps a century into the future. Where ink and paper failed, modern science stepped in, thanks to the research spearheaded by Paul, Ethel's grandson.
Yes. Through modern DNA testing, Paul and his family were finally able to unlock the silence of 1890.
Now, I need you to walk me through the mechanics of this because it feels like magic to a lot of people. How does a cheek swab today find a ghost from 130 years ago?
It relies on genetic triangulation. When you take a DNA test, the database measures the amount of DNA you share with other users in units called centimorgans.
Okay, centimorgans.
Paul's results surfaced a second cousin match. A second cousin shares a set of great-grandparents with you. So researchers look at the family tree of the DNA match, and they look at Paul's known family tree.
And compare them?
Exactly. They build out mirror trees, tracing every branch back in time, looking for the geographical and chronological intersection.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It is. By mapping the shared DNA and eliminating the branches of the family that were already documented, the genetic evidence pointed to exactly one man who was in the right place at the right time with the right genetic markers to be Ethel's father.
And that man was Charles Bentley, born February 9th, 1859, the son of Baker and Anne Bentley.
And the details of Charles Bentley's life provide a staggering, almost infuriating contrast to the life Amelia and Ethel were forced to lead.
Why? What did he do?
When we dive into the census and occupational records for Bentley, we discover that he was connected with the early police force in Beverly.
Wait, the police? Are you kidding me?
I'm not. It is the ultimate historical irony. In his public life, Charles Bentley was a figure of the law.
Unbelievable.
He wore a uniform that represented civic order, Victorian respectability, and the moral fabric of society. He was the enforcer of the very rules that condemned Amelia.
That level of hypocrisy is just breathtaking.
Oh, it gets worse. Because the DNA analysis didn't just prove that he was Ethel's father. By connecting various genetic matches across the database, researchers discovered that Charles Bentley fathered 3 other illegitimate daughters.
Wait, what? 4 undocumented daughters in total?
Yep.
4 girls whose birth certificates all carried the exact same silence.
Precisely. While Charles Bentley maintained his standing in society, entirely insulated from the consequences of his actions, he forced multiple women to bear the total crushing weight of Victorian judgment.
It's so unfair.
Amelia had to face the whispers in the Killam Church. Ethel had to face the displacement, the poverty, and the grueling labor of domestic service. Charles Bentley faced absolutely none of it on paper. The archive protected him.
It makes you furious looking back at the sheer imbalance of power, but here is the major takeaway, the thing I really want to impress upon you as we look at this entire story.
Yeah.
For centuries, we have treated the written archive, the ledgers, the certificates, the newspapers as the absolute truth. But the archive only tells the story of power. It tells the story of who had the authority to hold the pen. DNA tells the story of biology. We are living in a moment where we are finally democratizing history.
That's a great way to put it.
Finding out about Charles Bentley doesn't erase Ethel's hard years. It doesn't take away the cold nights in the attic or the terror of standing in front of a magistrate. And it certainly doesn't diminish her immense triumph in building a loving home with Henry.
If anything, understanding the systemic forces stacked against her highlights just how miraculous her achievements were. She won the game with a fundamentally rigged deck.
But what this DNA discovery does is restore a fundamental truth. It takes away the mystery. It gives her bloodline back. The missing piece of the puzzle is finally slotted into place, not for her to see, tragically, but for her descendants to hold and understand.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with a provocative thought to chew on. What happens to our understanding of the past when biological truth begins to fundamentally contradict the historical records we've worshipped for centuries? We aren't just reading history anymore. We are actively auditing it.
And in doing so, we give a voice back to those who were silenced. We see Ethel not as a fragment of a Victorian record, but as a complete, remarkable person.
More than a century later, DNA gave the blank space a name. This was Ethel Hughes, the woman before Connie.
You've been listening to Connie's Chronicles, Preserving the Past, Connecting the Future.